What's up, everyone? It's Q from RetroQ Gaming, and I'm sure everyone in the world at this point knows about Skyrim, which is, Bethesda's monumental, record-shattering, game-changing role-playing game from 5 years ago. And we all know that while it's an amazing game, it's fantastic, that it's getting a special edition, well, more so a remaster, and it's going to be called Skyrim Special Edition. The reason I bring this up is it's actually out in a little over 2 weeks from now. It's out on October 28th on Xbox One, PS4, and PC. If you do have a PC copy, if you have the base PC copy with all 3 individual DLCs downloaded separately, you actually get access to the special edition, the remaster essentially, with all the remastered DLC completely free on Steam. It also applies if you have the Legendary Edition of the game on PC, which is, it's the game and all the DLCs just sold as one package. So if you have it physical and redeemed it that way and then downloaded the DLCs, or maybe you bought it digitally and then downloaded the DLCs, or you bought the Legendary Edition, both physical and digital, it's the same deal. So the reason why I'm bringing all this up anyway is it looks great. I can't wait. I'm dying to play it again. I never really got back into Skyrim on the PC. I originally played it on the Xbox 360, and I put over 100 hours into it, and I loved every minute of it, short of a couple of game-breaking glitches I hit a few times, and some just general Bethesda jank in general. But other than that, when I got my, back in the day at least, in 2012, when I got my 2600K GTX 690 PC, I barely got into Skyrim. I only played like 3 or 4 hours of it, and yeah, that's the whole idea, because I was above the recommended spec, but Bethesda engines are never the most friendly. Hopefully, the special edition, the remaster of Skyrim, actually fixes that. Hopefully it runs a lot better, it's a more updated engine. There's obviously going to be graphical improvements, textures, and new technology enhancements, all that shit in there too. And I can't wait to jump back into Skyrim. Probably won't be instantly, but probably by the end of the year I'll have started working on it seriously again. So the reason I bring up all this anyway is because Bethesda have actually announced the new system requirements and recommended requirements for Skyrim Special Edition on PC. So I'm going to give a comparison. Now, naturally, you would expect hardware to be better nowadays because the minimum hardware that people have and have available is obviously a lot higher. Hardware is just a lot more powerful in general these days, and usually a lot more efficient. So when you take into consideration the original Skyrim minimum spec requirements from the 11th of the 11th, 2011, so you're looking at Windows 7, Vista or XP, 32 or 64-bit, dual core 2 gigahertz processor or equivalent, obviously better is better, 2 gigabyte system RAM, so 2 gig of memory. That's nothing nowadays. That's laughable nowadays. Sure, back in 2012 or 2011, it was kind of a minimum deal. It was like wasn't anything over the top, but a lot of people had maybe 2 gig at the time, and a 6 gig free hard drive space, as well as a DirectX 9 compliant video card with at least 512 megabytes of RAM or megabytes of VRAM. So they were pretty modest specs when the game actually came out in 2011. Now, I realize those are the minimum specs, but when you compare them to the modern specs versus what we have for Skyrim Special Edition, you're looking at Windows 7, 8.1, or 10, 64-bit versions only, which, thank God, is all I'll say. You've got a first-gen Intel i5 750 or an AMD Phenom 2 X4 945, which the Intel i5 is the fact it's a first-gen one is kind of surprising. I expected at least maybe a second-gen second-gen i5, but you're looking at 8 gig of RAM, so it's got 4 times the amount of RAM. And if you know Bethesda games, you know that that's a good thing. Most people will complain, oh, it's just being wildly incompetent and just the lack of optimization. No, who doesn't have 8 gig RAM nowadays? If you have a gaming PC, and most PCs in general will have 8 gig RAM. If you're looking at a gaming PC, the bare minimum you should have is 16. Maybe even, chances are you've probably gone for 32, but the bare minimum you should need, or you should have, is 16. But anyway, I digress. Back to the hard drive space, you're looking at 12 gigs, so the actual hard drive space requirement, the footprint, is twice the size. It's 12 gig up from 6 gig. So that's obviously to accommodate a lot of the new tech, the new features, and most importantly, the new textures. Hopefully they're significantly better. And for the graphics cards on the minimum spec for the new one, you're looking at an NVIDIA GTX 470, which is a 1 gig card, or you're looking for an AMD HD, well, would that not technically be a Radeon HD, but I know it was previous, before the merger. But anyway, an AMD HD 7870, which is a 2 gig card. So they're pretty, you know, they are minimum spec on both versions of the game there, and I think it's pretty modest and pretty tame. I mean, 470 is laughable at these days. Again, a 7870 has always been laughable because it's an AMD card. So I joke, by the way, don't go crazy in the comments about that, fanboys, please. But it's a joke. Now, anyway, what I do want to touch on a bit more is the recommended specs are out there as well. So we'll do the same thing. Recommended specs of the original 2011 PC version: Windows 7, Vista or XP, 32 or 64-bit, a quad-core Intel or quad-core AMD CPU. Doesn't specifically list any speeds, but it just would have gone without saying. A quad-core CPU back then would have been more than enough for recommended spec. 4 gig RAM, which is double the minimum of the base version. 6 gig hard drive space, naturally it's the same hard drive footprint, and a DirectX 9 compatible NVIDIA or AMD ATI video card with 1 gig of RAM. And it specifically lists an NVIDIA GeForce GTX 260 or higher, or an ATI Radeon 4890 or higher. Oh, I get it now. Wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. I didn't... Oh, minimum spec for the special edition. Never mind. I was looking at something the wrong way there. I kind of confused myself. I was wondering why the minimum spec was a 7870 and then the recommended spec was a 4890. Then I realized I was comparing the minimum spec. The minimum was the 7870 for the special edition, whereas the 4890 was the recommended for the original edition. So you can see even the recommended specs by nowadays are vastly, vastly out of date. Now, we all know... Actually, you know what? I'll get into that now in a second. But when you take into consideration the recommended specs for the special edition, again, Windows 7, 8.1, or 10, 64-bit, here's more of in line what I expected. An Intel i5 2400, which is the second gen i5, or an AMD FX 8320. I don't keep up with AMD chips. I don't know how good or modern or cheap or expensive that is, whatever. I just don't keep up with them. 8 gig RAM, as it's what you'd expect for, it's the same with the minimum spec off of the I was going to call it a recommended edition. It's the same as the minimum spec for the special edition. So they've obviously factored that in. We all know Bethesda games are big open worlds. They have to cache a lot of stuff all at once. So it's good to have the minimum and the recommended RAM actually cover both of those for a decent enough experience, depending on what you're playing it on. 12 gig hard drive space, again, same deal. Who knows, maybe they'll have a special updated HD texture pack like they did on the original version on PC. I doubt it though. If not, modders will take over the world and just do all that. And the last thing is the video card requirement on the recommended spec for special edition. An NVIDIA GTX 780, 3GB, or an AMD R9 290, 4GB. Now, by today's standards, most people have either a 970, a 980, a 980 Ti, or a 1060, 1070, or 1080. Now, even if you have any of those graphics cards whatsoever, you laugh at the special edition. With the exception is maybe a 970, because 3.5 gig video RAM can be a bit dodgy, especially in that card. But you get the idea. So that's the recommended spec. Now, it's still laughable by today's standards. Like, I mean, my PC, my old PC, my one that I built in 2012, still beats the special edition recommended spec. For the simple reason is it requires an i5 2400. I have an i7 2600K, 8 gig of RAM. I've got 32 gig in here. There's obviously 12 gig hard drive space, not an issue. And it requires a GTX 780. I've got a GTX 690 4 gig, which is technically a little bit more powerful than GTX 780. The only concern is some games, obviously some games don't use SLI, but some games some Bethesda games in specific won't take advantage of the cards that actually have dual cores on them. So either way, I'm still looking at roughly a 680. Having said all of that, I don't plan on playing it on this PC. I'm going to play it on my 5960X GTX 1080 PC when I get that sorted out, because there's been issues with it. So what I do want to touch on one thing as well is, obviously these are all the recommended specs from Bethesda. On top of all that, whenever you install mods, improve the graphics, add in additional content and all, obviously the recommended and minimum spec will go up, because you're loading more, it's requiring more, it's going to have better textures, better quality textures, or whatever it is. It's all going to be on there as well. So naturally, this is all factored in for the vanilla game with no mods and just the vanilla game with DLC, or the official DLC. So let me know anyway in the comment section below what you think of the recommended specs. Obviously, even recommended on the new one, they're still laughable by today's standards, and it's going to be really good. Hopefully the engine is fixed and it works really smooth and really well. Bethesda games have been known to be janky AF, is all I can say, and hopefully that gets fixed. I know I'm looking forward to jumping back into Skyrim either later this year or early next year, and it's going to be pretty damn good. I know one of my friends is buying it. One of my friends has bought he bought the Legendary Edition on Steam in the last couple of months, just so he'd get the Special Edition when that came out. Another one is buying it on Xbox One because of the unhindered mod support, unlike the PS4 version, which will have mods, but they will be limited and restricted. So he's getting the Xbox One version. We're all looking forward to it, and it's all going to be a good time, because Skyrim is one of those games that even when you look on Steam nowadays at the player base, it's one of the biggest games going, with the exception of the esports games like Dota 2 and CSGO and the like. When you look at any of the other biggest played games on Steam, Skyrim is usually up there. It might not be number one, but it's usually within the top 5. So anyway, let me know all that in the comment section below. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. You can follow me on Twitter. Details in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the rest of the videos in my channel.